in December. So it's 2 months. Plant Disease Identification by Paul Winsky, Fall Gardening Chores by Shannon Dietz, Holiday Plant Care by myself. Then going into December, Food Preservation with Amanda Cripple. She is with Family and Community Health. She gave the presentation last week. And then December 10th will be a first. We're just going to get together and do an Ask an Agent open forum. So you can ask whatever questions may have been burning on your mind but haven't asked them until now. So we appreciate your continued attendance, and we'll go ahead and get started today. All right, so I am Brandi Keller, the Master Gardener Program Coordinator. Thank you, Paul, for the introduction, and welcome to my talk on wildlife-friendly garden tips. Back in May, when we started this entire lecture series, my first topic was wildlife gardening, and I packed a lot into it. This will not overlap totally, but feel free to take a look at that video, as it is quite a bit more comprehensive on building a backyard habitat. My warning is that it went an hour long, so you just got double the information. Perhaps we'll put that in the email going out too. So to start off, our first tip is use native plants. And native plants just simply evolved in whatever particular area. Just because it's native here, it doesn't mean that it's not native somewhere else. That has been an extension question. So, it depends on that plant range. So what's native here, it could also be native in Virginia, but we definitely have some species that do better here than up north. In general, native plants use less resources, and they are just more appropriately support wildlife, especially local wildlife. One example might be with a native tree. One particular native tree may support hundreds of caterpillars, but a non-native tree may only support a small handful. The impact that has on wildlife is that these caterpillars are an important food source for mammals and birds. So if you're a fan of chickadees, you may be more likely to have chickadees in your yard if you have a tree that supplies more of their food source compared to one that doesn't. In our area, we do have a lot of great resources on native plants, from local nurseries, Mercer Botanic Gardens, even to the Native Plant Society of Texas, a Houston chapter. So as you see on the screen, for every layer of plants, there is a native option. Shrubs, perennials, ground covers. It doesn't mean that you have to only use native plants or that you don't have to, take up, your favorite roses. It's just, being aware that you can add into that. And some examples of non-native would be crepe myrtles, privet, lantana, and liriabe. So of course, I have a short list on the screen. At the bottom, there is a really nice plant guide for Houston that the Native Plant Society provides. And I have that link here and then at the end also. So this is just a few of the native plants we have. So the second tip is attract pollinators. And pollinators really are any creature that helps in the process of flowering plants reproduce. I think the ones that get the most attention are butterflies and bees, but it also includes wasps, flies, beetles, moths, birds, bats. I have an anole in my yard. I consider him a pollinator because he tends to trample over this one particular salvia. With the list, plant for seasons, my only, note here is pollinators, it's easier for them to find flowers when they're in groupings. So you don't necessarily just want to plant one flower. It's better for design practice anyway because it produces more of an impact, but it's easier for pollinators to see. If you want butterflies, invite the caterpillars into the garden. Larval hosts are those plants that caterpillars consume in their caterpillar life. For example, on the screen, the painted lady, they will lay eggs and their larvae will consume thistle. So that's a host. Passion vine for Gulf fritillary. And then probably the most famous one is milkweed for monarchs. Just be aware there that if you have a larval host, you might not want that as highlighted in your garden because that plant is meant to be consumed. To reduce or eliminate pesticide, or actually that's 3. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Provide water. If you have a bird bath, it's probably too deep for pollinators. So you can add some stones in there just to give them some more shallow areas, or create a mud puddle. When we are done, I will post on Facebook a short 3-minute video from the Harris County Master Gardeners on how to create a butterfly mud puddle. And I will post that on our Harris County Horticulture page. So it's real short but sweet. And then let's talk about native bees. Native bees do not create hives. 70% of bees actually nest in tunnels underground. Native bees are not aggressive, but their burrows are definitely getting destroyed or reduced by over cleaning, over mulching, or another big one is just not understanding that ground bees are important pollinators. I think anytime anyone sees some kind of flying insect flying into the ground, they may interpret that as a bad thing, and they immediately try to eliminate it. So that is really hurting our native bee populations. This could be a part of the yard that just is not kept real meticulous. You can mulch less. If you put a lot of mulch down, you're not going to have native bees. So you can either mulch less, or perhaps as it gets towards the back of the bed, you just don't put any mulch there. So you're kind of, providing them a little bit more area, but, you're also mulching. And then the other thing that you can do is if you have some fallen leaves or a log or a tree stump, don't immediately remove it. That can be a really important habitat, and not just for bees. All right, consider permeable surfaces. So impermeable surfaces are things like concrete, blacktop, brick paths with mortar. All that creates water runoff and increases the amount of non-point source pollution. Non-point source pollution really comes from residential areas and farms. It means that it can't really be traced back anywhere, yet it's what contributes to the most pollution in our waterways. Point solution would be municipal sources, so that would be really easy to trace back. So everything that drains ends up in our waterways. When you live up north, there's a saying, and it's we all live downstream. But here we are the downstream. But ultimately, we're not the ultimate downstream because it's the Gulf of Mexico that pays for everyone's overuse of herbicides, insecticides, fertilizer. So how do we kind of help in that way? Well, permeable surfaces, some examples are gravel, our landscape beds, turf, permeable pavers, and then the grass pavers that are on the right side. This allows water to filter down, penetrate into the earth, and then it is filtered naturally instead of it all just running straight from the sidewalk down the driveway into the waterway. Uh, and then this drainage, so for example, on the left with the gravel, I will say the gravel, the only thing that can be awkward with furniture, with being steady. So when you let your eye travel back, you'll see that patio furniture is actually on concrete. So that's a way to just compromise, with our needs compared to, the wildlife needs and drainage. But that particular sidewalk or any other permeable surfaces that can be designed to drain into gardens or just redirected into wildlife habitat. It doesn't always have to go out to the street. And the picture on the right, that is an example of grass pavers. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I think it's super cool. You do still have to mow and water it regularly, but it's a great way to serve like a parking area, but it is still a little bit more wildlife friendly. So tip number 4, feed the birds. You are likely to see more varieties of birds than any other animal. That is why there are so many birders in this country. It's a fantastic hobby, and your garden brings that birding directly to your backyard. Native plants provide birds very well with insects, fruits, seeds. Towards the end, I'll show you a database for matching natives and birds. I stumbled only upon it a couple days ago, and it was definitely made my day. So I think you guys will like it too. Obviously, hummingbirds probably, especially around here, get a lot of the media attention. They're one of the best pollinators. They love bottlebrush, salvia, esperanza. But there's a lot of other birds. Goldfinches, we will get them in their drab winter color, but they love the seeds of sunflowers, purple coneflower, uh, going a little bit more woodsy. Nuthatches and woodpeckers like the fruit that form on the Virginia creeper. So uh, birds are they can be pollinators, but they can also be really good pest control for insects and sometimes rodents. With that list right there, choose bird-friendly plants. I think the second one I meant, there's bird-friendly plants, and then there's plants that also seed in the fall that birds can find a source of food. The water source, delayed deadheading. I know in the past I've been terrible at this. You just want everything to look so clean, but you're actually taking away from a really cool, diverse aspect of your yard to support wildlife. And then that pesky minimize pesticides, which will lead us into number 5. Use less chemicals. So I'm going to read this mission statement that is on here. Goal of integrated pest management is not to eradicate pests, but to eliminate pest problems by strengthening and stabilizing the landscape so that conditions are more favorable for plants than for pests. There's a whole lot packed into that sentence. But really it means that we're going to try to prevent pest problems before they even happen, and reduce that environment for pests. A big one there is monitoring on a regular basis. And a lot of these practices are they're not only environmentally friendly, but they're also cost effective. So that's a win-win. So we're going to focus on 3 points. 1, non-chemical practices, and I mentioned one of those already. Just being present in your yard and being able to monitor. If I, back in Ohio, I would do what I called yard walks. So whenever I go and visit, even now, I'm like, all right, let's go do a yard walk, and I would just walk around every day, and so. Just by doing that, you can notice things before they become a big problem. 2, biological controls. Think about predators like we have on the screen right there. The green lacewing larva feeds on aphids, spider mites, other eggs of insects. So when you are using chemicals to kill everything, you're also killing those beneficials. Uh, Paul Winsky actually did, I think, a talk on beneficial insects. It's in that on that homegrown YouTube page. So if you want to learn a little bit more there, he went into that a little bit more. And then 3, properly applying pesticides. More is definitely not better in this case. Reading the label is sometimes, I mean, honestly, I just think it's torturous sometimes, but it is necessary. So when folks call in and want to know how to apply a chemical we by law, we can't tell you how to apply it. But what we can do is just help you understand that label. But in general, just try to use less and target more. You don't want to use just a general chemical that's going to kill a wide variety of insects. You want to be able to identify what you have and then treat as specifically for that as possible. That way you're not getting rid of a lot of the good guys. And the other thing with that too is just because you see one caterpillar, it doesn't mean that you have to use chemicals. I mean, there's a lot of, going back to the non-chemical practices, knocking them into the soapy bucket, aphids taking a hard spray from your hose to the plants. So you don't have to I think it is easy to overreact once we see something, but you can easily handle it without chemicals. 6, decrease the lawn area. So the lawn is really sort of a dead zone for wildlife since it tends to be just a monoculture and it doesn't really provide a lot of quality habitat for a variety of creatures. So when you think about the amount of lawn that we have and that we actually use, I know some of our properties are pretty small, inside the city, but outside, I mean, all it's doing is being mowed. It's not actually being used. So this could actually be one of the most impactful measures to increase diversity. So talking on our list here, probably one of the easiest things, taking baby steps would be to extend beds in length and width. So just take what you have and just take away a little bit more of that lawn. Beds around trees. We often see bed diameters around trees that are way too small. It's not proportional. So that would be another easy way just to eliminate some lawn. Create that larger diameter, or if you have a grouping of trees, create one large bed and unify them. Shady areas. I get calls on this. We're always battling lawn in shady areas. Well, you could just stop battling and accept that it just is not suitable for turf. And, a lot of that area might actually be pretty good for those native bees. The side of the house where no one ever walks. I mean, most of us have that. There's 2 scenarios that I've seen. Either nothing grows there, which I guess is a little bit better for the native bees and some wildlife, or it's just really thick with grass and all it's doing is being mowed. And then new island beds. So, I mean, you can really change the dynamic of your yard just by adding an island, and then you're reducing your lawn, giving more places for wildlife. So 7, addressing these beneficials with a bad rap. In this example, I'm going with bats. Just in the Houston area, we do have 11 bat species. This is just a short list of a few of those. So why are they so important? Well, all 11 species of bats feed on insects. Our particular bats, that's all they eat is insects. Moths, ants, beetles, leafhoppers, probably anything they can get their hands on. So most studies that have been done really pertain to farms, which have shown that bats save farmers over $3 billion a year. Um, so we don't have a lot of studies on residential, but it does show what an impact they can make. Each bat can eat half their body weight in a night, and then pregnant bats can actually eat their entire body weight in a night. And our Wall Street Bridge, those are all females from probably about January to September, October. So they're really making a huge impact, especially when they can fly up to 50 miles each way a night. They make a huge impact, especially with our agricultural crops. So this does help keep our populations, our insect populations in check. This is an example. If you took one thing out of, our diversity, how it would negatively affect another group, and our insects would definitely get out of control. So what can you do? Well, number one is just that image. I know sometimes people feel afraid of bats. They don't fly in your hair. They don't do anything like that. They're out there. They've got a job. They're focused on that. And just recognize what a positive effect they have in our environment. At home, prevent them from being a nuisance by making sure that you critter-proof your house. If you put up a bat box, it will not divert an existing roost into that bat box. But if you have one up, it could prevent one from taking up, in one of your structures. The other thing is if you find bats in like dead palm fronds or trees, just leave them be. The eastern red bat, they get super cold, especially with the temperature out there right now, and they will just shelter alone. At least the eastern red bats, they're by themselves, and by the next day they will be gone. And then you can just be thankful you got to witness it. Number 8, remember the night creatures. So night creatures usually have a food source that comes out at night. This can be insects, flowers, or rodents. Some animals are nocturnal just because it allows them to avoid humans. So with moths, obviously they're actually more important pollinators than we realize, just because they're doing their work while we are asleep. But what they look for, that's what that list is. So they like flowers that are in clusters, white or pale colors, obviously flowers that open in the evening or overnight. One of my favorite plants of all time is the moonflower, and that opens in the evening. And then they also like flowers that produce a lot of nectar, or nectar that is really deep. Think about like morning glory, yucca, things like that. Going into amphibians, frogs and toads, many are threatened, and they are very easily susceptible to chemicals, in addition to habitat loss. But the presence of amphibians really indicates a healthier ecosystem, because that means that there is prey and predators. There's both in your yard. So that means you're really doing something right. But all of these eat insects. Again, can you imagine our insect population without all these animals consuming them? So some of the things that you can do to help is avoid mowing at night. Obviously, use less chemicals. You can also provide shelter. That could be plants or houses. But in general, amphibians, I think they give, they give that really important nighttime quality with the sounds that they make, that when they are lacking, you notice it. And then just to acknowledge that there's some other animals that come out at night. We already talked about bats. We're going to talk about opossums here in a minute. But, raccoons, opossums, snakes, sometimes they enjoy the cooler temperatures at night. And then obviously owls. So they can prey on insects, amphibians, rodents, snakes. So owls are another one that when you have it, there's a good formula in your yard because you're able to support predators and prey. We're almost done, but Paul, are there any questions?
Yes. You've got one about Turk's cap. What would be the best time to prune that back, Turk's cap?
Um, I I don't know that I can tell you that straight off, but I don't know when. Like sometimes I don't see it pruned a whole lot, so it depends. Like if you just want to keep it really low, but I would say when it's a little bit more dormant. So maybe around now. You don't really want to wait until January or February. If we get a freeze, you don't want to damage any of that new growth. But I can look into that, and maybe that'll be a Facebook post. But Turk's cap is a wonderful native plant for a lot of things, including hummingbirds. Anything else?
That is it for now.
All right. All right. So number 9, know your wildlife. So knowing your wildlife is about understanding if there's anything to worry about with that animal. Most of these animals, they have more of a menacing reputation than they deserve, whether it's from fear or annoyance or just a misunderstanding. We get a lot of calls. Lately, we've gotten even a lot of calls on opossums. They're really cool because they are the only marsupial in the United States. Most of us, if you're on social media, have probably seen the meme about opossums and how beneficial they are and how they eat a lot of ticks. That doesn't necessarily reflect Lyme disease transmission, but they do eat ticks. According to the Carey Institute in New York, one opossum in just one season can eat about 5,000 ticks just in one season. Part of that is, when they end up on their own bodies, when they're cleaning themselves, because they do clean themselves a lot, they just pop them in their mouth and eat them. So that's a lot. That's a lot of ticks. But they will eat just about anything, insects, rodents, snakes, snails, even the overripe fruit left on the ground from all these fruit trees that we have in this area. They do tend to be somewhat resistant to rabies because because of their low body temperature. So you don't definitely that wouldn't be the one thing you'd need to worry about if you saw an opossum. And then the other thing is opossums really get blamed for a lot of what raccoons do. Um, Raccoons are they're naughty. They get into trash and they knock things over. And then, by late morning, the opossum's just lollygagging by and, he sees the trash and he's like, oh, well, that looks good too. I'm just going to go walk over there very slowly and have a snack. And then they get caught by the human and they get blamed for it. But opossums are really transient. So generally, they don't stick around a whole lot. In general, they're very good. Armadillos. Number 1, I would have included armadillos in this slide just so I could share this photo with you. Like, how cute is that? Obviously, with them, it's their unusualness is what's so different. With the protective shell, those bony plates, they have really poor eyesight. You can almost see that from this photo. But they have a really great sense of smell, and they are more active at night. I've seen one during the day, but more than 90%, can you guess what their diet is? Let's say it all together, insects. So more than 90% of their diet is insects and other little invertebrates. Uh, there are times where they can be a nuisance with digging and burrowing. But if you have a brush pile or like a corner that's left natural, for your native bees and um, frogs and lizards, uh, that may keep them away from other parts of your yard, especially if it's just rained and it's moist, then they'll be attracted to that and go see what they can find. Know your coyotes. So coyotes is another one. Again, we've gotten calls about this. The first thing is it freaks people out, but when you really look at it, it indicates a diversity in species in that area because it's supporting prey and predators. Eliminating coyotes completely can really throw off populations of smaller species like opossums, raccoons, foxes. So what effect would that have? Well, that's going to increase in in numbers of more annoying rodents, and then also decrease bird populations because opossums, raccoons, especially raccoons, they can be really devastating if they find bird eggs. But coyotes can adapt easily. This is their advantage and disadvantage. They definitely have a decreasing habitat, lack of predators, um, and they're not afraid to coming closer to people. The big one here is, yes, they can prey on cats and dogs, but most attacks are really during when they have pups in the spring. Those males are very territorial of other canines. So in the spring, just keep your pets on a leash and just be more watchful at night. It doesn't mean we have to eliminate coyotes. We just need to be more watchful. And for all of those animals I just talked about, you can do things to reduce, their nuisance. Don't put food and water out for stray cats or other animals. Secure your trash. That's a big one. And then keep bird cleaners clean. And I'm going to add snakes in here for the last one. So I understand this is an animal that really is heavily rooted in fear. While that may be innate, the more one learns, the more hopefully that stigma um, of fear can lessen. Most of the snakes are non-poisonous. Garter snakes come in many colors, and they can help with rodents and slugs. They are not only predators, but they're also prey to other animals and owls. If you want to be snake friendly, you can provide rock piles for shelter, walk your lawn on warm days just to be sure that they aren't out sunning themselves before you mow. But if you want to discourage snakes, first of all, don't use mothballs. Those are toxic. They're not meant to be outdoors. But you can remove their hiding places like the aforementioned rock piles. Keep your grass mowed for fewer hiding places, and then close up those openings around your house and your porch so you have less problems with them coming in. I just added these 5. They're not necessarily directly related to your garden other than the trees, but it's important for wildlife. Consider if you need a tree cut, pardon me, avoiding any kind of nesting season. Definitely the spring, but that can go into the summer also. Proper disposal of pet waste. If you live near a waterway and you think, it's no big deal, that water, that pet waste has bacteria that pollutes waterways. It's actually one of the worst things about our pollution in our waterways. So dispose of that properly or dig a hole in your backyard where you can bury it. Do not feed bread to waterfowl. This is probably a very popular pastime. White bread lacks nutrients and can cause angel wing in waterfowl. I would most everybody has probably seen this, where the wing is twisted up and out, preventing the bird from flying. When they're young, they can grow out of it perhaps, but as an adult, it's permanent. So it puts these birds at risk from normal travel and predators. So buy duck food and just keep in the car. It's cheap. Just don't pawn your bread off on waterfowl. Don't release balloons, plain and simple. Balloons kill. They go up and they come down, and animals consume them. That's all that happens. Your loved ones are not honored by killing animals. Birds can get tangled in them. Sea turtles can consume them. Um, and then keeping cats indoors. I know there's always debate on this. Some people just love their cats to have their freedom, but they are one of the biggest threats to birds. So if you're trying to bring wildlife in, it's very it's going against your mission of bringing wildlife in. They're just not part of our natural ecosystem. You think, oh, it's not a big deal, but not that many domestic cats would be out in the wild. We breed them. They breed themselves. When they're feral. We just have a lot of cats, so it's estimated that they kill more than 1 billion birds a year. Besides the fact that indoor cats, their lifespan can increase by being inside. All right, this is that database that I told you about, audubon.org, native plants. So what you do is you can put in your address or your zip code, and it pops up the native plants in that particular area and what birds they may attract. It was very fun to play with, so I'll leave that with you. Here are some resources and links of just some things that I used here today. And you notice the second one is the Harris County Guide to Butterfly Gardening, and that's a pretty extensive document. So again, thank you. I will take if there are any questions, but my next talk is in October on holiday plant care. So that'll be a bit different and very timely with the season. So Paul, are there any questions?
There was an additional comment from Alexa when you were talking about the possums.
Oh yeah.
She noted that they also do not carry rabies.
Yeah, well, that's what they tend to, they can carry rabies, but they tend not to really, it doesn't really go anywhere because their body temperatures are so low. But yeah, so that's a big one, and bats too. I think I had that on the front page. Sometimes when people, have a negative image of wildlife, one of the first things might be rabies. So they can't say that with opossums. And then bats, it's really low also, but it can happen if you're picking up a bat, which you shouldn't do. All right, anything else?
Nothing at this time. So I think it all looks good. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And please, let me see. Somebody just said, do you mean November 19th for holiday plant care? I believe.
Yes, I am not going to go back
correct.
in time.
Yes.
Gosh darn it. Every talk, there's always one small little, see, that's my little, what do they call it? The Easter egg thing my mistake you have to find.
Okay. Yes, that will be November 19th. So, yes, registration is open for November and December. So, go to the site at Eventbrite. You can register for those talks, and we want to thank you all for joining us. And we hope that you have a great rest of the day and a great week.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.